Hello, BookTube. Recently on this channel, we hit 4,000, but not 4,000 subscribers. That was a long time ago. We hit 4,000 videos. I had it pointed out to me, and then I kept watch that I have made 4,000 videos on this channel, more than that by now. And that seemed as good a milestone as any for a Q&A, so I put out the call for questions, and once again, you did not disappoint. We have a ton of great questions to go through. So we're going to go through these, and with the usual caveats, I'm going to cut off each video at 30 minutes. And I copied all of the questions from the comments field, where there's all sorts of addendum, like you posted one day ago, edited one day ago, pictures, that sort of thing, that would slow me down if I tried to read it. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just going through these. So I just blanket copied and pasted. And if therefore I missed your question, if I cut out your question, then we'll do plenty of Q&A. So just feel free to ask it again. So we'll start off with William S. When living in other countries, did you ever write professionally in another language? If so, did you find any other language equally as enjoyable to write in as English? On one level, I never did, no. But on one level, there's never going to be a language that's more enjoyable to write in than your own, I don't think. There have been some notable literary figures who would contest that, but I'm not a notable literary figure. but aside from English, the most fun language to write in was Italian, where you're inadvertently composing poetry. Even a non-poetic soul, you're inadvertently composing poetry. Joe Buckley says, what are some of the most thought-provoking essay compilation books you would recommend? Well, I think I've got one right behind me. There's the Art of the Personal Essay by Philip Lopate. There's the Oxford Book of the Essay by John Gross. There's also a 3-volume set. I don't have it here. I don't have any props for these Q&As. John D'Agata started out as an enfant terrible, did an essay collection that was meant to be genre busting. Essay collections always do want to be genre busting. Even Philip Lopate's latest one hesitates to define the essay, hesitates to define what it is, so that you can include anything you want. If I mean, that's playful, and it can lead to good anthologies, but I want to stress that essays do have a definition, and if you're including liner notes from an album you really liked when you were a teenager, you have broken that definition. But also, there's the Norton Book of the Essay. I don't know that they make it anymore, and if they do, knowing Norton, they may do it in multiple editions, so I'm not even sure which edition I might be recommending. I believe it had a fallen leaf on the cover, but that doesn't help much. I should do a whole video on essay collections. Then Andrew Russell says, hi Steve, what are your thoughts on Piers Morgan, and more specifically his abrupt departure from Good Morning Britain? Those of you who may not be up on the story, there will, the celebrity and future U.S. President Meghan Markle, the wife of Prince Harry, gave an interview with Oprah Winfrey. I believe her husband was there, but she did most of the talking, and all the talking that he did was when her hand was firmly up his sock puppet. And in that interview, she talked about how she had mental health issues, bad mental health days, and when she went to officials at the palace, back when Harry was a working member of the royal family, they told her to, you're not getting any kind of professional help. It would make us look bad. Buck up, basically, they said. And she complained about this on Oprah, and Oprah sympathized. And Good Morning Britain is a kind of a talk / news / opinion show. Piers Morgan was unquestionably the star of that show. He's a big, volatile guy. He's very intelligent, but can be very stupid, and that is a golden combination for TV, because you don't ever know what he's going to say. And he went on Good Morning Britain after that interview and said, I don't believe a word of it. I don't believe that she ever talked to anybody at the palace. If she did, prove it. I don't believe that if she did talk to anybody at the palace told her any of the stuff that she's saying. I think she's just vilifying them in order to make herself look good. And this was followed by a group segment in which another person, at the little morning desk that they have there, I believe he was a weatherman, plaintively and rather drippingly ripped into Piers Morgan and said, we know you don't like her. We know you don't, but that's no reason to disbelieve her on such things. And in the middle of that drippy tirade, Piers Morgan stood up and walked off the set. That's enough. Had enough of this. Don't have to listen to this. And immediately afterwards, we were told that he had been let go. Now, that event has taken on all sorts of different shadings. There were plenty of people on social media immediately saying that he had a better gig lined up and that it was all theater. There were people on social media immediately saying, no, a star as big as Piers Morgan doesn't get fired for 40,000 complaints to Oxcom. They don't fire him, that he must have just orchestrated a quitting. And he said that free speech was a hill he was ready to die on. And I'm sure that before the year is over, we will see him in some other high-profile position. And as to what I think of it, I hate to be in a position where I am largely in agreement with Piers Morgan, but I also don't believe a word that comes out of Meghan Markle's mouth. I don't believe anything that she says. In most people's cases, if they were to talk about mental health illnesses, mental health issues, that has a stigma attached to it, and it is an act of bravery to talk about such things. So in most people's cases, I would believe it. If Oprah Winfrey, for instance, were to talk about such things, there'd be many reactions on my part, but assessing whether or not any of it is true would not be one of those reactions. But with Meghan Markle, I unfortunately stand with Piers Morgan. I don't believe a word she says. I don't believe any of it happened. And that is not the same thing as so many of those officious, condescending comments that came into the British broadcasting. Most of those comments, most of those 40,000, 50,000, I think we're over 60,000 comments now, most of those took a very sanctimonious and dim-witted tone of saying that, mental illness is very real. My daughter, aunt, niece, whoever suffers from it, and how dare you say that her suffering isn't real? When none of that is true. Piers Morgan wasn't saying any of that. He wasn't saying mental illness isn't real. He wasn't saying anything. He wasn't saying anybody who says that it is lying or anything like that. Nothing like that at all. It's just an easy horse to get up on and moralize. All he was doing was saying that he doesn't believe this one person, and I don't either. And so it's not peculiar to him. But that's where I stand on the matter. He's gone from Good Morning Britain. When you watch Good Morning Britain now, he's not there. And that is a loss. I believe that is a loss. I would be amazed. I haven't actually looked into it, but I'd be amazed if the viewership on Good Morning Britain didn't tank dive after he left. Because just as the viewer never knew what he was going to say, the guest never knew what he was going to say either. So if they got on some pompous, MP, he could be just fine and roll with them if he'd had dinner with them or something like that, or he could rip them to shreds in what used to be a common way on TV and now is totally gone. These well-lit, well-coiffed talking heads are part of a publicity apparatus. They don't step out of line. But he was a star, so he could step out of line. He could say, well, I understand what you're saying, Minister, but it's a lie. It's obviously a lie because last week you said this. And you could see in a lot of those cases that the ministers were caught by surprise and affronted because they don't get confronted with that sort of thing. So I think it's a net loss in a number of ways. It's a net negative in a number of ways. It's not just, it is a little tempest in a teapot. I think that Piers Morgan was very entertaining in that roost, and I'll look forward to seeing wherever he ends up. But a larger harm is this idea, not only that it beatifies Meghan Markle, it has made her into a kind of celebrity, into even bigger megawatt celebrity, a celebrity of persecution. Saint Meghan Markle, the patron saint of wokeness, is what the other talking heads in Britain are calling her, with a lot of justification. But worse than that, it does what the 20th century just loves to do. It takes a whole subject and puts it into the forbidden subject category. I have never understood that. I think that hurts us all. It limits us all. When an odious piece of dirt like Brett Kavanaugh gets up in front of the Supreme Court and taunts them, obviously lying, where a very courageous woman gets up in front of the Supreme Court with cameras all over the world trained toward her and says, my memory is a little imperfect, but I remember the shame. I know he did this to me. and he shouldn't be on the Supreme Court judging, making the laws that affect women all over the country. Watching something like that was amazing and appalling at the same time. But watching things spring from that, things that sprang from that and that were revivified, that were re-strengthened in that whole Brett Kavanaugh thing, was believe all women. So again, an attempt to take a legitimate subject and move it, just take a poker marker and move it to the category of topics that we can't talk about at all. I don't believe all women. Women lie as much as men do. That's ridiculous. A woman brings an accusation and suddenly the duty to find out whether or not it's true goes out the window? No, absolutely not. Same thing with someone who, let's leave out the fact that it's about mental health. Okay? Let's leave out the fact that Meghan Markle was talking about having a bad mental health episode. Let's forget what the reason was and concentrate on what she did, which was to libel a whole family. And by extension, a whole country. She was that interview was meant to libel the royal family as both image-conscious monsters and also racist. And like Piers Morgan and like all the rest of you, I hear something like that. I don't think believe all the women. I don't think, well, if the words mental health are connected with it anyway, then it's off the table of rational consideration. Instead, like Piers Morgan and like a lot of other people, I say prove it. If you're making an accusation that damning, prove it. If I made an accusation that damning, I would have to prove it. So I don't know what's going to come of this. Good Morning Britain has been gelded. There's no reason to watch it, and so I'll be interested to see what Piers Morgan does next. Although I'm not sure that I believe the people who say that he stormed off as part of a bigger deal. He strikes me as the type that would storm off a set. Anyway, a long digression. Let's move on. JG says, number one, how do you feel towards Joe Biden? Is he going to change things for the greater? Joe Biden is a good guy. He is a good guy. I have never really believed that he was presidential material, but he's a good guy. And maybe in the course of time, he has become presidential material. He is genuinely sweet. He is genuinely caring. When he talks to you, I've had opportunity to talk to him a number of times, and when he talks to you, I know there's this alt-right neckbeard characterization of him as, Uncle Bad Touch or Creepy Joe or whatever, Pervy Joe. That's not the case. It's just the way he is. When he talks to you, he's all over you. Whether you're a little kid or a woman or a man or an elderly person or a smart mouth op-ed writer, no matter who it is, he's getting in close. He's putting his arm around you. And when he says, no, I firmly believe this. Look, I believe this. No, I promise you it's not like that. He means it. He really means it. And after 4 years of a president who didn't know or believe or mean anything, that is a distinct breath of fresh air. And Joe Biden has a slendering majority in the House of Representatives and a majority of exactly one in the Senate. So he has the ability to do some things. But it's extremely limited ability, and it's getting weaker all the time. And therefore, the only way that he can really get stuff done is a way that, as I've said on this channel many times, I said it under his predecessor, and I said it under the predecessor to that. The way that he gets things done is bad, and that is by fiat. That is by executive orders that can be overturned, yes, by the next guy, but they have the force of law while they're in effect. They shouldn't, because they're not law. Senate makes the law, but they do. And Joe Biden can do a lot with that. He can put the United States back into the Iran nuclear deal, for instance. He can put the United States back into the Kyoto Environmental Accords and any others that come along. And he probably will do. He will continue to do for the next 3 years a whole lot of that kind of thing by executive fiat, by diktat. And that, I don't like that at all. But in the short term, at least, sure, he has the ability to do that. What he really ought to do, what he really ought to be concerned about, is that the Republican state governments all over the country are making it impossible for black people and Democratic voters to vote at all. The media in this country is saying they're doing this because they're following the quote-unquote big lie that Donald Trump put forward, that the election was stolen from him. I honestly don't see why we're talking about big lies or election reform or anything else He incited a violent insurrection to breach the capital of my country, execute his vice president, overturn an election, and install himself as a dictator for life. I don't know why we're talking about anything like that. I don't know why he's still free. I don't know why the whole business of the United States government isn't concentrated only on that. That is not business as usual. That is not something that happened in the past. Bygones be bygones. That's existential. But one way or another, the next person who comes in to power can wipe out all of those executive fiats and establish others. And I don't like that. The Republicans are working hard 24 hours a day to make sure that they cannot lose another election. And it's all fraudulent. It's all criminal. But still, it is happening, and it will have the force of law. So, I don't know. Joe Biden is distractible, but he's surrounded by a lot of people who aren't. I'm hoping that he is willing to countenance the playing of hardball. He sometimes is, but usually not. In his later years, in the last 30 years, he has not really been willing to countenance the playing of hardball, and he's going to need to do it. Because for the last 150 years, there were two political parties in the United States that represented two different poles of ideology, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And that is not true anymore. And if he doesn't see that, then he could be the greatest traitor in American history. Because it's up to him to do something about it. If that is not true anymore. There is now a Democratic Party and a party that is effectively an American neo-Nazi party. With total loyalty to one man, science denial, misogyny, anti-Semitism, and a drooling, slavering thirst after autocracy. An openly expressed thirst after autocracy. If you don't like what your opponent is saying, have them arrested. And if Joe Biden doesn't do something about that, there are all sorts of tactical things that he can do to hamstring that and slow it down. And if he doesn't do those things, then it's on him. So I like the guy. I obviously like the guy. But it takes more than that. It takes a lot more than that. So I don't know. The jury's still out. The year is still young. And Joe Biden hasn't been faced with a catastrophe. He's been faced with the catastrophes that were handed to him, like the last Democratic president, who was handed a plate of catastrophes. Here are a bunch of things that we screwed up. Make sure that you fix them and fix them miraculously in record time, or we'll blame you for them. Joe Biden was the same thing, a cratered economy and a massive pandemic. But he hasn't faced anything new of his own, so we shall see. Number two, if all George Washington biographies are biased and an untruthful glorification of the man, how should we educate ourselves on his life in an unbiased and truthful way? What are some good resources you use to come to your conclusion on him, as you are one of the few people I have watched that does not elevate George Washington to the highest level? Well, it's still biographies. I mean, I've read a lot of primary sources on Washington. There's a library here in Boston that has a great collection of them. But it's as in most cases, it's still secondhand biographies that will do it. It's just read them with your brain instead of with your beating patriotic heart. If you get to some circumstance, even Washington's hagiographers will take you straight into circumstances in which he is, for instance, planning a military endeavor. And we're told that everyone on his staff objected to it, that they were almost physically willing to restrain him. And then the narrative just moves on. And what you want to ask yourself in a moment like that is why? Why were all the members of his staff? Hagiographies will always portray them as dim-witted or not as long-sighted as Washington, or even unpatriotic. And you want to look at a situation like that and say, why? Why was that? And you always want to remember that this was a man who branded slaves in the face, who sat on his horse and told his overseer to brand the face of someone's mother while her children were watching. This was a slave master, an extremely prosperous, hard-hearted slave master. If you're reading a biography of Washington and that is not an element, then where it's, he led the army and he saved the country and he led it as the first and purest president, and oh yeah, there was a working plantation back home. If that's the way it's phrased, then read it with a tougher eye. So books like Richard Norton Smith, Patriarch, I've recommended that one. Cincinnatus by Gary Wills, actually very good about Washington. But even the ones that the most flagrant hagiographies won't help you at all. But for instance, Flexner, on Washington, The Indispensable Man, is a fantastic book. Just read it with your cynicism on. Read it with your cynicism on. So if you're reading in that book an anecdote in which Washington comes off smelling like roses at sunrise, doubt it. Go to the sources that are cited for that anecdote and see where they come from. Not so much in Flexner's case, but in a lot of Washington cases, if you read a smelling like roses at sunrise anecdote like that, and then you go to the bibliography, you go to the notes section of that chapter and chase down where that anecdote comes from, in a lot of cases you'll find it comes from another Washington biography, not from original sources at all. You want to be careful about that. That's all. With Washington or anybody else, but it happens a lot with Washington and with Napoleon. Anyway, we're on to your third question. What is your definition of literary fiction? Is there as much of a difference with genre fiction and literary fiction as some claim to be? Unfortunately, yes. Literary fiction has been hijacked in the last 20 years by identitarian politics, so it's a world different from genre fiction. If you were to write a piece of genre fiction in the way that most literary fiction is written today, the readership wouldn't, A, not buy it, and B, say, what the hell are you doing? What on earth is this garbage? I did a tag about literary fiction, in which it's 1% tag and 99% rant. I'll try to remember to leave a link to it down below. But literary fiction is unplotted autofiction about the Nigerian immigrant experience or upper middle class Connecticut divorce, written by pampered members of some select identitarian group, specifically on the understanding that it will never be critiqued, that it will never be criticized. You are only to praise it because of the biography or the skin color or the sexuality of the author. It's and when I say unplotted, you know already, if you listen to this channel, I mean that literally. The characters don't do anything for any understandable reason. They can pull huge amounts of money out of thin air. They can be dirt poor when they have money coming in, and there's no ending. The author has never been told that they do anything wrong or ever could do anything wrong when it comes to writing. Anything they write is perfect. You're just so great. So when they get bored with this stupid, wan, anemic little thing that they have created, they just get up from the table and walk away. And that has become such a hallmark of American literary fiction that some practitioners of American literary fiction have actually had characters comment on it in the literary fiction. Yeah, I don't really like endings. I just prefer things to just stop. It's largely worthless, but I still read a huge amount of it. I read all of it that I get, all that I can get my hands on. Mary B says, last year you recommended a historical murder mystery series about a British couple. Was it Amory Ames? Yes, it probably was. Amory Ames. Those are very good books. Very good. Anthony Suppa says, during your Daily Penguin series, we never reached that great Russian novel that you said would eventually make an appearance. Would you consider resurrecting the Daily Penguin series for one more episode so we can hear your thoughts on that great Russian novel? What great Russian novel could you be referring to? Now, I had this pointed out to me. The Daily Penguin series that I did in 2020 never actually did War and Peace. I was certain that we did. I think the reason why I avoided it is because I was daydreaming about a massive read-along. And I still am. What a thing that would be if we had like 40 or 50 booktubers reading War and Peace all together. How wonderful that would be. But there will be no resurrection of the Daily Penguin, but I should get around to War and Peace, obviously. I don't think there's a new translation coming out this year, but I'll come up with some reason to talk about it. Lulu Bubble says, no question, just thank you for being the best booktuber on the platform. Well, that's awful nice, but I think we both know that's not true. I'm an old coot who turns on his camera with no editorial effects whatsoever and natters about books or whatever else is on his mind. Touchy Joe Biden. There are a lot of booktubers who are a lot better than I am. but thank you. Thank you very much. Doom Antidote says, I've always enjoyed your rants, thoughts, and predictions into American politics. I don't know how apt this question is for a Q&A. Well, pretty much anything is apt for a Q&A. But I'd be interested to hear any thoughts on the state of British politics at the moment. Well, British politics is all COVID. It's all COVID 24/7. So you're watching all of these different politicians. I'm kind of amazed. You've got a classic American politician in Sir Keir Starmer. You've got a classic American politician there. A 21st century American politician. Someone who speaks forcefully without thinking or believing anything. He doesn't think or believe anything. And right there in Parliament, you have some pretty naked authoritarians. People who are proposing pretty draconian authoritarian power grabs. You know what they want. You know that if you elect them, that's what you'll get. But the thing that's kind of amazed me about British politics lately is that I didn't see it coming. Boris Johnson seems to have survived COVID. And I don't mean survived having COVID. I mean he seems to have survived the governmental catastrophe of COVID. People still seem to like him. They have the sense that he is trying to do the right thing in the face of massive obstacles. And that's kind of interesting to me. He is glib and has an absolutely fatal amount of condescension towards government. He just deep. I mean, he is not like Keir Starmer. He doesn't believe nothing. But the things he believes, the British public, I think, would find them utterly repulsive. He thinks that most members of the British public and all members of journalism are contemptible insects. And he tries to hide it. He does a pretty good job of hiding it. But that plus a certain bluff overconfidence, I was certain that even if he recovered from having COVID himself, he couldn't recover from botching COVID. And it seems to me like he maybe is going to do that unless this exit plan out of lockdown he fails. And that is a distinct possibility, and it's one that I've been saying from the beginning. This talk that he and his lieutenants are indulging in about how we want to do this lockdown right so that we never have to do one again. Oh my God, is that dangerous? We know we're going to have to do this again. And it's going to be an albatross around his neck that he said that. Imagine the tidal wave of disappointment the British public will have if they have to go back into a strict lockdown sometime in 2021. And Peter Hitchens is completely correct when he says, you do that enough times, you enrage and disappoint an electorate enough times, they're going to blame you for it, and you're going to lose your job. We'll see. It's a tightrope. But it's fascinating to watch. Absolutely fascinating to watch. It's great to take my mind off. It was great to take my mind off American politics during the years of Donald Trump, where he had an administration that literally never spoke on any subject without lying. Easily provable lies. Fascist, Orwellian lies. There are 4 lights. Where you're just sitting there saying, okay, I know that's not true. I watched you do X. Now you're telling me you did Y. Not that you're doing Y now, but that you did Y all along. I watched you do X. Live. And it was a great relief to go from that, from a presidential administration literally telling 100 million cult members, don't believe what you see and hear. Believe what we tell you. And having it work on American soil. It was a great relief to go from that to watching British politics. And I got hooked, so I still do. How are we doing for... Oh my, we've answered barely any questions and we're already out of time. Can we do another one? Yeah, well, let's do one more. Nineland2 says, I recently read The Road by Cormac McCarthy and pretty much agreed with all of your assessments expressed in your read-along and review videos. And I was curious what your thoughts are about his other works, particularly Blood Meridian, which is considered his masterpiece and widely categorized as an example of the great American novel. No, it's not. No, it's not widely characterized like that, and it isn't considered that way except by Harold Bloom. Harold Bloom surprised everybody by praising that novel. It's a thin, dumb, wretched, contradictory, stupid, entitled, lazy novel. And he went out of his way to praise it. And he did it for the shock effect. Everyone associated him with the canon, with Shakespeare, with Montaigne, with these great, woolly, old, canonical figures. He went out of his way to praise this thing that he knew the hep kids loved. And everybody went with it. Everybody's run with it. No, there is no consensus that either it's his masterpiece or that it's a great American novel. That all comes from Harold Bloom. There might be a consensus now. People might repeat that, but they would never have thought to say it if it weren't for him. That drives me crazy. That drives me crazy. It stinks. It stinks as a novel. Anyway, we'll end on a vituperative note. I'll be back for part 2. Thank you, book 2.